Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman, Chairman of the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee. The American Fire Service is rich in tradition and culture. A firefighter's life is filled with many emotional highs and lows. Stories of major fires, national disasters, medical calls, firehouse living, and family life are often verbally shared from one generation to another. Many times, these stories are lost forever when a firefighter passes away. In an effort to preserve these stories, in 2019, the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee launched a new program of recording audio-video of our retirees' lives. These stories will be shared on our website, gfhbc.org. In 2020, we did not record because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please listen as these firefighters share their life experiences with all of us.
My name's David Brame. I'm 58 years old. I worked for the city of Greensboro from 1984 to 2013. When I say city of Greensboro, I referenced 3 different jobs within the city. I started at 401 Patton Avenue as a mechanic, and I worked there 10 months, and then applied for the fire department garage, and I worked there about 4.5 years, and then I continued my service on the line with Greensboro, Fire Department. A little bit about my history of this. I was born and raised in Greensboro, and I lived, matter of fact, from Station 7 2 streets down. I lived there from when I was born till I was about 11 years old. Then we moved out into the McLeansville area, Brown Summit area, and that's where I went to Northeast High School. And I ended up graduating Northeast High School, continued my career at Guilford Tech Community College, and went into diesel mechanics. Graduated, and then after that I became a volunteer and then things of that nature. I'll talk about how things led up to wanting to be a firefighter in my time of service. When I was in high school at Northeast, a friend of mine, which was on the fire department, and he retired, Captain Brazel, he was a senior in high school, and we was talking about, we're young, we don't know what we want to do, but we're talking about, what are you going to do? And I said, well, my dad was a mechanic, and we worked on all of his family stuff. There was 11 in his family, and all of them was painters, and we worked on their stuff free, and we got our house painted for free. But I don't know if that was a big plus, because there was 11 of them. We worked on 20 cars, and we got one house painted, so that was a big joke about that. But we decided, me and Tommy, he went in the fire science program, and I know, Chief, you went that route, and I decided to be a diesel mechanic. And so that was the avenue was taken, and I went on to be a diesel mechanic, went through the school, and graduated. But while we was in high school, Captain Brazel asked me, what you thought about being a volunteer firefighter? And I said, well, I don't know nothing about it. And he said, well, I'm an associate fireman at Fire District 13, and he said, just come up there one day. So on Sunday, I went up there and started meeting some of the firemen, and didn't know nothing about it. Not one thing. I lived near Station 7, still never interested in being a fireman at the time. So I ended up joining associate fireman and enjoyed it, and I became, a part-time employee up there, and that was what took me to where I would like to be a fireman. So going back to when I was in the city garage, a job opening came up in the fire department garage. Chief Perry was retiring at the time, and Ken Murray took his spot. I didn't know all this, and I was 20 years old. So I applied, and the guys down at the garage, I was young, and they said, "You're not going to get that job." And he said, "There's only 4 mechanics down there, and there's one opening." And it was tough, and being young, I didn't know. So it just so happened, I think, Chief Cockman, you knew these people. Scott Teeters, he worked with me at the city garage, and he lived on McKnight Mill Road with his grandpa in a little extra house or extra room there. And I told him we'd ride together, work every day. We're 20 years old, and I said, "Hey man, I'm gonna put in for this job down at the fire department garage." My history with the volunteers, I got a little background in mechanicking on fire trucks. I said, Henry Jeanette out there at Fire District 13, he taught me about, doing pump packings, working on pumps and building valves and redoing them and all this. And I said, "How about calling your Uncle Johnny Teeters and just give me a hand? I want to get a hand on these. I know a couple of them applied, and I want to get the upper hand." So ended up, I got the job, and I was greatly appreciated. Am I related to any former people on the fire department? When I came in the garage, there was one person that said we was. I didn't know it. It was Jay Lewis. And Jay, when he heard my name and I met him, he was at Station 1 at the time, a driver, if I remember correct. And he said, he come in, the first thing he says, "What's up, cuz?" And I was sitting there, and I was like, I don't even know this guy. And but he started relating people we knew. And he said, "Well, we might not be first cousins, but I think we're third cousins." So any relation, no, that would have been me and him. And today, I have 2 sons on the fire department, but that's all the relations I have within the fire service. My son's is Wesley Brame, and he come on after I left, and he's at Engine 1 now, and I have a son, Bo Brame. He's at Station 4 now. Grandchildren, I have 2 at the moment in Wesley, 2 little twins. I do have Bo and his wife Haley. They're expecting one November 14th, and we're excited about that. And it's a little boy. And then Wes and Mallory, they have another one on the way that's expected the 1st of February, and we're very excited for that. What was the process like when I applied for the fire department? Well, I have a 2 series on that, to be honest with you. The process was, at the time, I think everybody's done this. We was the first class to do the combat challenge kind of things, what they said. And what, used to flip the hose in the old days and do pull-ups, sit-ups, and things like that. So the first process of the combat challenge was similar to today. You go up the stairs, pull the hose, come back down. You hit a Kaiser machine today, but back then you hit a roof simulator about 40 times, and then you finished it and went through the pulling the dummy, and then you climbed the ladder, and then you took a hose and went through the smoke lab. But what I was going to say that was very interesting in my processes in my interviews was when I applied for the fire garage. I go on my interview. I'm 20 years old, and I had never done many interviews in my life, and so I go up there. Chief Jones interviewed me. He was in training at the time when I was applying for the fire department garage. Chief Brad Cox, Captain Paul Brooks. But the interviews was Chief Jack Coble, Frank Jones, and Ken Murray. I go in there nervous, and I'm like, okay, whatever they fire at me, I'm gonna just answer the best of my ability. And they start talking about, what's your history of knowing about fire trucks? Because I'm gonna work on fire trucks. And I go through, well, in volunteers, this guy taught me this and this, and I'm pretty excited in my interview. I feel like I'm doing good. There's other people applied and probably a lot more seniority than me. But the last question I was asked was from Chief Frank Jones. He said, "I see you have applied for the fire department 4 times. Are you going to apply again?" And I was caught so off guard because I wasn't even expecting that question. And I just sit there, and I know they looked at my face and like, he's caught off guard. And I just come back and say, well, I went to diesel mechanics, and got a degree, and this is what I want to do. And so that led up to that interview, and I got the job. I was very fortunate. But going back to the fire department, I was in the garage. So 5 years basically in the garage. I knew every fireman. I knew every chief. I built relations with all these, working on fire trucks and talking to FEOs and stuff like that. And so when we come to apply, Virginia up front, training center and the fire department garage was side by side at the time. So I want to apply, and I'm scared to go to Ken Murray, and I'm scared to go ask. I want to apply for the 38th recruit class. It was coming up in April, and I go up there and I talk to Chief Cox. I said, Chief Cox, I want to apply for that next class. That's a passion. I have a passion for the fire department. I've been a volunteer. I always wanted to be a mechanic, but this got I got in this way. First step, getting in the doorway. He said, I tell you what, I'm gonna come back to you tomorrow. And I didn't think nothing about it. So the next day he comes back in the garage. He says, I went over there, and Chief Jones was the chief of the department at the time now. And he said, I told Chief Jones you want to apply. And I mean, I'm just sitting there thinking about that one question I had in that interview when I came in the garage, and I was thinking, man. And I said, I want to tell Ken Murray too, because Ken Murray was, I respected him as a supervisor, enjoyed working in the garage. And so that's kind of how it all panned out, me applying. This was the bad thing. We get to the combat challenge. I sign up first because all I got to do is walk up and do all my sign-ups in Virginia because being in the garage. First class, Captain Spears just came in training. He came up with this. And I didn't realize that I'm going to be the first one. I'm working out, I'm working at the garage, but I'm working out to get prepared for this course. I knew what was coming up. I thought I was going to be prepared. So I go out there to do this, and I get ready. You had to put just air pack on, no mask or nothing. I turn around, and there's every chief of the department upstairs sitting outside watching me because they knew me. And man, I went to nerves. And I'm thinking, I got to get through this. I'm 150 pounds. I'm not the strongest guy. I mean, I could hold my weight, but I wasn't the strongest. And so I go through the course, finish the course, climb the ladder, and I have to go over there to crawl through the smoke lab at the time. Follow a hose. That's all they wanted you to do. And they're all looking at me, and Brad Cox is standing beside of Chief Cox. And you had to put a mask on then. And it was just old Scotch, 2216s. I pull it up, and I just start throwing up. And I'm sitting there so embarrassed. I go back to the garage. I go up in the locker room between training, and I laid there for an hour because I got to go back to work. But that was one of my memory things of applying for the fire department. Starting salary, I know it was around $14,000 a year. They did do a little adjustment for me because I did make a little more money in the garage, and they did cut my salary a little bit, but they didn't cut it to its lowest, and I wasn't even expecting that. So I felt privileged, starting out at the salary I did. I can't remember the exact one. How many weeks was it in training? At the time, when I came through, it was 38th recruit class, and we were supposed to go through 16 weeks of training. We started April 1st, and we were supposed to end up in August. I think that was, if I'm right. Basically, what happened was we got in training, and they was trying to open the 4th Battalion. There was only 3 battalions in Greensboro at the time, and they was trying to open the 4th Battalion. So they ended up cutting us down 2.5 weeks, I think, to about 14.5 weeks. So we graduated a little bit earlier, and to open the 4th Battalion, because that took time with opening the 4th Battalion. That opened jobs, so we opened more battalion chiefs, and I don't know how the commanders worked at the time. I'm trying to remember how many it was for 4 battalions, yeah. Coming out of the garage, I was fortunate to see 2 classes go through, and I met the firemen then. I knew all the training staff. The highs going through, or I guess I wanted to look at it as the people I met, and we had a lot of volunteer firefighters in our class. I don't even, we had 25 in our class. I don't remember, there was well over half volunteers. So the guys that hadn't had no fire experience, we kind of bonded quick. Chief Spears always said this was it was his first class, he said, but this was the most firefighting class he ever seen. And that was a privilege. Some of the funny things going through, Mitzi Rice, she passed away. She was in, if I'm right, the 37th recruit class. She done aerobics. So we was one of the first classes kind of to start aerobics, where you had to be in there with 25 guys that was so uncoordinated when it came to aerobics. And, that was some of the fun things. And all the friendships we met and continue. We still get together, that one class, and we have had 4 reunions. So, everybody can be there. The low, I would have said it had to be the first month. I'll never forget, they came to me because I've been in the garage a lot, and they said, how do y'all do study groups? What do you do, this and that? And I said, well, I will say this, and this is what I learned from previous firemen. You have to do a lot of studying on your own, and you have to do group studying. And so, different groups get together depending on where they live, how much they travel. And there was 5 of us. I think it was Chief Henley, Captain Browsville, Captain Ed Smitty, Chief Smitty, me, and there was a guy named Tim Parrish. Tim was in our study group. We've been in a month, and I'll never forget this. We're at Captain Browsville's house, and you know how it is when you get together and everybody wants to talk a little bit. And I said, all of us is kind of married. Let's get this done and study. And anyway, we studied, and I don't know, a couple hours. First test coming up. We're all nervous, and Tim Parrish, he's got a motorcycle, and I had my motorcycle license. I got on, just rode around the yard, and then, he goes to leave, and he leaves, and he goes down the end of the road, and all of a sudden, here he comes back. Unfortunate, we watched him die. He slid the motorcycle down, hit a wall right there near, used to be Bob McLean's house. When he lived there, he didn't live there at the time. We done CPR on him, and unfortunately, he passed away with 2 kids. And I remember coming to training Monday, and Chief Brooks, Captain Brooks at the time, Chief Cox, and Captain Spears called me in because they knew me and they knew I was there, and just that we went through the details, what happened, and it was just an unfortunate incident. On a positive end of this, I went to a graduation 2 classes ago, and I hate to say the number because I don't know it. Yeah, somebody, Nick Carter was graduating, which is my son Bo's brother-in-law. So I went to watch him graduate. Tim Parrish's son was in that class graduating. So it turned out good. Was there special something about doing this job as being a firefighter? Yeah, there's something special about it, and you really have to look, and not just, you have to look at your 30 years of history, and everybody looked at it, and the rewarding of it. It doesn't matter if you save a life. If you pass a promotional or you get put in for an award, you feel so good about yourself, and it's a confidence builder. And along the way, I've got some promotions, and I was very excited about that. But you can write a call, and people out there thank you for the service you do, and sometimes it's the other way. But you have to look at the big picture, and yeah, this job, there's nothing more better than this job. My first apparatus assignment and station and all, coming out of training, I don't know if Captain Spears sent me here because he was there. You know, everybody wanted to go to 4, 7, 11, 8, you know, the active stations, which now, you know, you got to look at 14. You got to put 14 on the map. They're a busy station. They run a lot of fires. But I went to Station 5. I was on Engine 5, and I remember my first captain, which was Bobo Brown, Wayne Brown. You know, I didn't have him long. He retired. I had Hal Ritter as a driver, and I had Edie Bailey, and everybody knew Edie. And so there was, you know, I already knew him. And how did, was I accepted out there as of being a fireman? I think the reason I was accepted, everybody knew me from the garage. And, you know, always they would come to me like, well, I hope you come to our station because I got a lot of stuff broke down. We need to fix on Saturdays. And I was thinking to myself, man, I want to get out of mechanic and I just want to be a fireman. That was my passion. But yeah, first assignment, Station 5, I had a ball. Did I have any nicknames? No, I knew a lot of people did. I never had nicknames unless it was something bad I hid behind my back. About pranks and jokes, you know, that's the question. And there were so many in the fire department, you know, especially rookies coming out, and then as time went on. But I'm going to give one that was in the garage, and I want to give one that was on the line. So when I was in the garage, Ken Murray just made supervisor, and you know, I'm new and been there maybe 6 months, 8 months. I can't even remember at the time. And Ken Murray came to me and Tommy Milliken, which was in the garage, and he said, Chief Jones is bringing his car over here after 5 o'clock, and we got to work on it. So it's got a little issue. So, hey, he brings it over after 5 o'clock. We do a tune-up on it. I can't even remember what the car was. There was a picture in the garage about this, and so it was. I don't know. It might have been a Friday, and he goes out with his family, and it breaks down. And you know, Chief Jones, he's not going to call a wrecker. He's going to call some fireman, and they're going to hook a chain to it, and they're going to pull it to his house. So they pulled it back to the garage. This was on Monday morning. We come into work, and he comes over there, and we kind of done heard through the grapevine. And he is on us about shade tree mechanics. And if anybody knows the term about shade tree mechanics, basically it's back in the old days where people pulled their cars up under a tree, a big limb, and if you ever seen them sitting around, they got a big chain to pull the motor out. And a shade tree mechanic was basically, you probably never been to school, you didn't know everything you needed to know, but you done what you had to do. And so that was considered shade tree mechanic. He called us that. So it wasn't a couple days later, we come into work, 8 o'clock in the morning at the garage, and I look up, and there is a tree hanging from the rafters. And it was a tree limb. And I'm thinking, it didn't one person put this up. I found out later, some of the firemen had one of their tractors with a bucket. Frank got them to put the thing up, hung it in the rafters. He pulled his car under it, and they took pictures. And we come up. We ended up. It was just a running joke. Me and Ken and Tommy, our picture under it, and it hung on the board there for a while. But going back to the fire department on jokes, there was one that just stood out to me more than any of them. You know, Chief, there was all kinds, and played on you, played on me. But the one that stood out, there was Arlie Reese and Julius Evans. We was at Station 7, and they always had something going on, and this was ongoing. I mean, not one day. This went on for years. We were stationed together, probably a couple. But Arlie would always get the best, no matter. And Julius would try to mess with him, but Julius went on vacation. It was a rainy day, and you know, back then we had a lot more downtime at the time. Arlie Reese, everybody had lockers, and he brought his sewing machine in. Instead of going in there and cutting his locker, we had the tools, and messing his lock up, he pulls 3 lockers apart. gets all his clothes out, and he sews at the knee caps, the elbows, every one of his uniforms. Because, you know, back then we didn't have t-shirts. So when he comes back from vacation, he can't get his arms or his knees. And I mean, he didn't have no backup. And put every locker back together. I'm like, who would take that time? Cooking together at the fire stations, when I came on, I didn't know how to cook. I couldn't do nothing. You know, all I knew how to do was turn a wrench and eat out. But when I went to Station 5, I had Bobo Brown. We called him Captain Bobo Brown. I was so fortunate. We paired up with somebody. Oh, I got paired up with a captain that's been here 30 years. So he helped me along, and you know, it took me time to learn how to cook. But one thing I always said, you know, and I watching these interviews, a lot of them said we enjoyed our time in the kitchen, watching each other cook, teaching people how to cook, and the camaraderie, sitting down at the table, talking about things, or, you know, Captain Gibbs, every rookie that came in, when everybody sit down and we got ready to bless the food, right after he blessed, he would walk over to the rookies and he would take the 2 big spoons and just put it in his mouth. You know, this is camaraderie to break the rookie. And you know, that was fun when I was at Station 7, him doing that. But it was when I was, as time went on, I still always wanted all my companies to sit down together. There was times we couldn't, you know, EMT all day or stuff like that, and we, you know, you had to go out and eat. But that was one of my big peeves, was I didn't like going out to eat. Which at Station 7, you know, I was there 17 years. We didn't have the finest restaurants in that area. There was not many. So that kind of drew, that was fortunate on my end to, you know, eat at the stations. I think just talking to the guys, eating at the station together, talking to the guys, teaching them how to cook, talking about old times, talking about some past. And I always don't want to dwell on the past. I like to talk about the new people that come in, and guide them in the direction. Whether, you know, they can cook here, but also you have a family you can cook for at home. That was important. And to this day, my wife, she says, I don't cook. I still cook, and I love it. You know, and I guess I grew into, you know, J. McCarter taught me how to do chicken dumplings and this. What was one of my favorite meals? Actually, I got it from Captain McCarter. I had to call him up. And I always told all the new people, get you about 2 good meals that's different from somebody else. And because transition, when you're at 2 company station, you're cooking every 8 shifts probably. But mine was chicken dumplings, green beans, cream potatoes, and biscuits. And I never mastered homemade biscuits. Bob Smith, he was great at it. Captain Gibbs was. I know a lot of the old guys. And you know, as time went on, that was a tradition. It kind of went away because of time, and you know, making biscuits, you know, you just can't let them sit there all the time. So, you know, this is, you know, one of the things you've done with new recruits, you know, and at one time, the cook, he always washed the dishes, and the guy, the cook the day before, got out of the kitchen as a whole. But then as time went on, you know, people play cards and play all kinds of games out there now. But some of the, you know, it was funny how they was nervous anyway in there washing dishes, and you know, you're talking to them as you go, trying to pass time and talk about stuff, and the guys would just be sitting there. You'd hand it over here on this side like he's going to dry the dish off, and you know, he'd come around and then he'd put it back. He might smear something on it, and you know, just keep handing it. And you know, then the recruit would finally, you know, you'd be talking to him about something off the wall, and he's like, dang, I didn't know there was this many people eating. The difference about advantages and disadvantages living in a dorm in cubicles, I didn't learn about cubicles till later on in my career. If I'm correct on this statement, and don't hold me to this, I think Station 5, when they built it on Westover, was the first cubicles in the fire department. the stations I was assigned to, I was station 7 out of the gate, went to station 5, and then I was back at 7. So till I got promoted as an officer and went to 43, I was in the dorms for almost 20 years. So I never experienced the cubicles till I got to station 43. Now, one thing about the dorms, the jokes that went on the back, and station 7 was a smaller station. That's where your TV was and things like that. The camaraderie at night, before you finally went to sleep, it was talking about family, and things, and they might be talking about fishing trips or hunting trips, or what you gonna do the next day. Some of these, a lot of them had second jobs, and you built a relation back there. That was one thing I did. It was an advantage. The disadvantage of the dorm, I will say this: after going to a cubicle, there were certain days, as years went on, you got busier riding calls, the training level picked up, the things you done during the day, the call volume, and there'll be times you wore out and you're ready to go to bed. Well, becoming a driver and a senior in the back, me and Jesse Walker, we was the ones that wanted to go to bed a little bit earlier. So we would tell the guys, TV's got to be off at 10:30. That's the days we had the rough days. So there was, back and forth, there was advantages and disadvantages. Going to cubicles when I went to 43 as an officer was the first time I ever been in a room by myself. And I go back there, and you think 20-some years you've been in a dorm, and I go back there and I'm looking at 4 walls, and I'm like, I'm not used to this. It was a difference. But it did have its advantages when you got back to an active station. I think it's a disadvantage at the stations that don't run a lot because you don't develop relationships. That was my opinion. A retiree firefighter coming in the station and visiting, I always thought it was interesting. And being in the garage, I did meet a lot of retirees that would walk through there that I heard their name, but I never knew them. I never could put a face with them. And when they come to the station, they most of the time came to the station they was at, and they didn't know nobody when they came in. And if they did, I wanted them to feel welcome. Especially, it's like you're walking into somewhere you've never been, a new church or anywhere new. I wanted to talk to them a little bit and, talk about me a little bit. And because it's not just about all the retirees, it's coaching sports has really helped me learn about the younger generation and developing relationships. I'm the coach, but I want to know about you too. But in relations, I want to know about the retired firefighter too, and some of the stories. And I enjoyed it, and I always tried, when I became an officer, I just said, hey, let's give these guys a little respect. They don't come by here much. I know I don't go by stations a lot. I go see my sons. But if they take an opportunity to stop in, let's give them that time. What values do I see doing these interviews? And I had this in the back side of my notes on this, and I'm glad you asked that question, Chief. I didn't know when I started reading these interview questions how I was going to answer. So I went back and I started watching Chief Spears, Captain May, Captain Woody Parrish, and then I went to Captain Brazel. I tried to go back and forth, McCarter's, and I tried to look at the transition of years ago and now. And if I could tell any officer out there today, I think this will be a plus on a rainy day, winter day that you're not doing nothing. Use these videos, if you watch 1 or 2, as a training tool, and you'll never know who can pick up something that will help you in your time with the fire department. I appreciate Chief Cockman, you doing this, and I know it'll move on. There's a lot of history behind this, and I think it's going to be a good training tool. I hope some new officers, or they watch me on mine, that they do this. Some of my first calls, first medical call with the fire department, I really don't remember. I'm going to be honest.
That's fine.
But my first fire call, I'm going to remember my first fire, and it wasn't a little structure fire. Understand that I came from the volunteers. The biggest fire I ever seen was maybe a 2-story house, but mostly single story, 1,700, 1,800 square foot in the county. Not, I had a little fire experience, but my first fire, I was at Station 5, 3rd shift on. We get the federal building, and the federal building, our captain, I think Bobo
The courthouse.
the courthouse, the old federal courthouse, and we get a fire. I think it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right after we ate, and Captain Bobo Brame, I think he was getting ready to retire, so he wasn't there. Hal Ritter moved up, Edie's driving, and I'm on the back, and David Garrett was on the back. We coming down friendly, and man, you see smoke, you see fire blowing out the 3rd floor, and Engine 4 gets there first, does a size up. I have no clue what to do. I know we're going to pull lines and we're going up there, but understand this: we pull. They pulled a 2.5, but we pulled 1.5 inches at the time, and we're going up to the 3rd floor. Well, when we hit the 1st floor, I couldn't see. Now, it wasn't awful heavy smoke, but it was smoke I couldn't see. Not a lot of heat. And I remember Rick Gentry and
Brad Cox.
no, it wasn't Brad. It was Rick. I can't remember who was with him on the squad that day. He knows. And me and Pat Henley, Chief Henley, come through training. He's on Engine 4. It's me and him and Garrett. We're 3 recruits on the 3rd day and never seen a commercial fire. And all I'm doing is I'm following Rick and him, and I'm on the hose. I am scared to death because I'm a little disoriented in this. I never been on 3 flights. Well, we ended up going past. It was only a 3-story building, but the flight, it was a roof access. We ended up going to the roof access and had to turn around and back up. And we go in, and the fire gets knocked out and all that. But that was an eye opener for commercial fires for me, because being in the garage, if you remember, I was on call every time a second alarm went out, and I've been to some calls y'all been on. And back then, I mean, it wasn't no 4-inch hose; it was 2 in and 2 back, and it was 3-inch if they had enough, and 2.5. And I got called because I had to drive the fuel truck, because these big fires, and then you had to cut the headlights off and all this as a mechanic. And I was fortunate to see a lot of big fires back then. I mean, it was amazing. I can't even sit there and dwell on half of them, 4 years of it. And I learned so much watching the technique of firefighting then. One thing has never changed is, you can advance hose a certain way and it's better for the department. But how you set up to stop fires is the big thing. And that was a lot of experience that Chief Powell brought after the Davie Street fire. But that was my big fire. I mean, I had a lot, and I learned a lot from everybody, but that was one that stood out just because I was young and didn't know a lot. How did calls affect me, or was there a call that bothered me more? And sitting back watching some of the interviews, I'm going to relate one back to I was a volunteer. I just became a volunteer, just could ride the truck, and we went on a shooting. A suicide, and we get there, and there's an older gentleman at the time, probably in his 60s. He shot himself in the head. He had a note there where he had cancer, and there was no recovery from it. And EMS comes, sheriff comes, and so calls over, and we're riding back to the station, and the guy said, they talked about it a little bit, but it seemed like when we got back to the station, they dropped that call. It's over. Let's get ready for the next call. And I was sitting there, I'm probably 18 or 19 years old. And I'm thinking, you know, how do you handle this? And that was my first one that I've learned to, you know, you got to let it go. We got to move on. The sad thing is about this whole thing and all of these calls, you know, in the city of Greensboro fire and the stuff all of us has seen, I can't say there's one particular. The only reason, that's the one I learned from. That's the one I learned, let it go. And looking back at all of it, this is sad. You got used to death. And then when you had a family member pass away, it didn't quite bother you as much. Or somebody in your family, aunt or uncle. And my mom used to tell me, says, and my wife, she says, you just have no heart. And I would say, I'm just adapted to these situations. And after I retired, I believe I cried anything. The transition was you're trying to be tough on the fire department around other fellow firefighters and women and stuff. You know, was that the transition? But there's not one thing that just stood out. It was just the whole process during my career. When I came on, only squads came on, and you was on a squad, and you know the squad rode. And then there's a transition. The squads run and the engines run, and the squads would run with them. And then it went to all engine companies running, and then ladder companies filled in areas if somebody was on a call. And EMT levels changed so much from when we came on to today. And I talked to my sons about the drugs they push and the positives of a lot of it. But I will never forget this, and this is why I'll say, you know, they map these stations where they should be to get in that 4 or 5 minute response time and for medical ends. And I will not forget this. I just made officer. I was at 43. EpiPens has just came out. We're getting trained on them. I've never seen an EpiPen used, you know, allergic reaction. And it was something new. We got a call, 12-year-old girl mowing the yard. It was over off Lake Jeanette. Nice big home, and we pull up, and there's Daddy in the road going crazy. We get there, and this girl is barely moving air. I mean, you see it in her face. And they said she got stung by yellow jackets. And that was the first episode I seen of EpiPen getting used. We hit this girl, and I mean, it seemed like 5 minutes, but it was probably 2 or 3 minutes, and you just see her. She's breathing better, moving air. And so about fire trucks running medical calls, I think it's a plus. Now, there's a lot of overkill nowadays, and you're not, I don't know if you'll ever stop that. That just comes from the person calling in the dispatch procedures, you know, and they tried to make it better. It's a good thing. Affect me as a firefighter, I do remember this. I was out eating, and I was with Willie Johnson and Gary Chandler, and you know, back then we had little Nextels. Everybody beat everybody then, and anyway, got beat. Somebody said about a plane hitting one of the towers, and we thought it was one of the twin planes because that happened years ago. And anyway, I went by Station 7. That's where I was stationed. I was off duty and ended up staying there a couple hours. I know there was a lot of firemen here that went to New York and rode prior to that and got to meet these. I never knew any firemen in New York. All I done was watch, you know, channels like everybody else. A lot of the old stuff that came back. I did go to New York. I went to the Fire Museum, 9/11 Museum. It was amazing. At the time I went, there was 10,000 people going through that thing a day. That was unbelievable. And every fireman told me, get there and go. You could, if you was a fireman, you could get in at 8:30 and then everybody else 9. But I got so caught up in going through it. And then, you know, they had what they call the jump room, where it just showed people jumping. And man, I just sit there and I thought, wow, I can't even put it, I can't even imagine none of that. So how did it affect me? It was unbelievable and, you know, just amazing. But going back there, you know, I'm always glad to go back there and see, you know, the 9/11 Museum. Okay. Who were some of my mentors that helped me out along the way? One of them probably going to be shocked, but I'm going to start backwards and work forward. Coming on the department, back when I got on a ladder company, just left Engine 5. I went to stations, or ladder 7, well, truck 4, I'm sorry, at the time. And I had Captain Robert Atkins. And his mentality was, hey, we're going to beat that squad to the nozzle. And me and Gary Knight, we had the Scott 22s. We would put the air packs in the seat. And because when Rick and them got there, they had to get them out of the box, so we'd beat them to the nozzle and make them mad. But one that stood out, my first one, they switched officers back then. I had Captain Ed Sawyer. And he called me and Gary Knight in, and I will not forget this. He said, we are a truck company. If I see you on a nozzle, I will break your hand. He was the first one that started teaching me about truck company operations. I've never been anywhere in my life, career, volunteer, known anything about truck company operations. And he mentored me. We didn't have the technology back then, but what we had, he showed me. And then I was fortunate, right after that, it wasn't long, I got Captain Phil May. And he took me to another level of truck company, because I was on truck company more than half my career. And I love truck company operations. But the guy that I mentored a lot, and there was others, don't get me wrong. There was so many in my career that helped me move to where I got. Chief Spears, and he never knew it. I never worked with him. I never had him as a commander. But when I learned is in 1987 when he came in the garage. Came in the training center, and that was his passion. And the reason I remember this, I remember Engine 5, he was a big 5 fan, wouldn't pass pump tests. And at the time, the guys done it, but training came down, and if something was wrong, one of the garage guys went down. And so we got down there and worked on it real quick, still wouldn't pass. I'm going to try to keep this story short. So I ended up rebuilding the pump, bring it back. We go down there, me and Captain Spears, just us now, and we go, and it gets in the 100% test. 5 minutes in, it fails. And he's pissed, I'm mad. And we pull off the suction strainer going into the pit. There was manila hemp rope all up on the strainer. What it was high vacuum, and it wouldn't let it pass. We ended up cleaning the pit out. There's where I learned how no matter what Chief Spears done, he done perfection. And he instructing, he was my first training officer. He was his first training class. The little things he done in class. And then as time went by, I watched him go from a squadman at Station 5 to a captain at 9, training, and as he moved up the ladder, safety, he done it all. He could have been the chief of the department if he'd have put in. And I watched everything he done with perfection. He gave it 100%. He could take a hazmat class that nobody wanted to be a part of, and he could take it to the next level where you wanted to be a part. And I just looked up, to him, even though he was never one of my officers. When you talk about your proudest moments on the fire department, it really started when I got hired in the garage. I was proud because I was part of a fire department I wanted to be a part of. Then getting hired, because it was tough to get hired years ago. You had a lot more applicants. And as my career went, I think every little step I was proud of. Being, passing your fireman 1 test, passing your fireman 2 tests, officers putting you in and got Rookie of the Year, and all the, I ain't gonna say a bunch of awards, just the awards I got. Somebody had to put me in that thought enough of me, and I was proud of that. And in the driver's process, you was doing the driver's process at the time, Chief, and if you remember, I remember when I was in the garage, you put everybody through it. Even all the drivers had to come off the line and get certified. And I remember all that. And I remember talking to them, and they were stressed. And some of them, they had to complete 100% at the time. And they'd have to come back and take 10 questions or whatever. But my driver's test, there was only 9 spots open. And we're studying. And, I passed that test. And I failed 5 questions, so I had to come back and make those 5 up. I'm nervous, but I was fortunate on the driver's end because I worked on fire trucks. And that was probably, out of 163 questions, I missed 5. That was the easiest test I ever took in my career. Not because, it was just because of my background. And that was a proud moment. And, you know, I moved on and, you know, I started trying for officer. And took me 3 tries on that. The reason I'm going to say this one stands out is being a fire captain. When I came on the fire department and I looked at the officers I got to work with, I went, I would never see that level. These guys are sharp. Would I be a driver one day? I felt like I could. Now I'm young, but I didn't know the transition, how, you know, 20 years in the fire department had worked. But I didn't make officer. I was a driver for a long time. I didn't make officer for, it was like my last 8 years. But I'm going to say making officer was probably my proudest because then I got to teach them what I've been taught and let them teach them what they wanted to be and about their family and stuff like that. Did I ever try to go to the chief's process? No, I didn't. I was asked to ride the car. And I've thought about it prior to getting asked. You know, what you're going to be asked one day, maybe. What do you want to do? And I decided I didn't want to take that route. And the reason I didn't, at the time, I was on ladder 7, and I had some of the top-notch guys on my company. We was well known. Chiefs, when we got to a call, they wanted to call on us. And I had FEO Brent Jinks. I had firefighter Jason Job and firefighter James Lawrence at the time. And when I came into work, all I had to do was hold them guys back. They knew so much, and that was one of the reasons I said, I like what I'm doing. I don't want to move to that next step. Losing one of your own firefighters, it's tough. There's a couple I'll mention, and Tim Parrish was one of them in training. I really, I only knew him a month, but I guess sitting there watching it happen is totally different than hearing about it. And that's never left me. And Jackie Beard, I wasn't there when it happened. A lot of people was. When I went to 7 in 1989, Jackie Beard came out and was on Engine 7. So I got to work with Jackie probably, I think, 3 or 4 years. I can't remember the whole time. I got to know him and Jackie, his wife. And there were so many people out there that knew Jackie. It wasn't just me. And now I look at the guys that was my captains I worked with. Willie Johnson, we just lost one yesterday, Butch. You just have to remember the good. That's how I look at it. It's tough to deal. You miss them. I live across from Willie. Would I do this job all over again, and would I change anything? I looked at that question and I went back, and I went back from the day I went on the line and even the day I was in the garage. There's nothing I would change, because when I came on, remember, I couldn't cook and all I knew how to do was mechanic. When I left this department, I knew something about electrical work, I knew something about plumbing, I knew stuff about putting shingles on, I knew about building houses, building friendships along the way, helping people out, helping, how we used to help each other out. So there's no way I'd sit there and say I'd change something. Now, would I change it? No, I wouldn't change nothing the department does, because if you came in 1985 up to, especially even now, the change has changed in training. All the stuff has changed. The fire trucks and stuff like that. How the fire trucks is built, the nice equipment you have now. there's no way it's been a progress, So no, there's nothing I'd want to change in any of it. The changes I've seen in the department, remember this, when I came in the garage in 1985, I'm opening these doors on these fire trucks, I'm looking at these fire trucks, and I went, wow, there's not a lot of equipment here. My first assignment when I went in the garage, this is no joke, they didn't have a reserve ladder truck. And Chief Powell wanted to put that in service. So this thing had hydraulic brakes, it had not a top on it, no lights. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, we're gonna take this 1959 LaFrance and we're gonna put air brakes on it, we're gonna put a top on it and use it as a reserve. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I go to Ken, I'm new, and I said, is this what really my job is? He says, yes. He says, you will work on it and you will move. And it just so happened, I've been in it about a year almost, but we had to work on our other equipment, and ladder 11 was in a wreck and down on South Am Eugene, and it totaled it, and fortunate somebody passed away that been drinking and run a red light and hit the fire truck. But ended up I had to move up on that ladder truck. But looking at is what's changed. That was just talking about how we're going to put that truck. But the trucks now, I mean, understand this, in the garage, engine 4 was the runnest truck in the city of Greensboro. Only run 400, not quite 400 calls. McCarter run 700 if he could. But the miles in 1 year was only 3,000 miles when we changed oil. We do that monthly. I mean, that's a routine. That was telling the call volume wasn't there, and the trucks was old. So when I say change has come, these new fire trucks and the equipment on it and what the training center's done to take us to another level of training is unbelievable. And we're talking about the tools we have on it. When I was in the garage, we used to supply the tools on the fire truck, and man, you'd look, we'd hand out these tools. It was awful, but that's just what we had. You had to work with. But technology was the biggest change. The computers, because if you remember, you remember this. The only experience we got in training was where you went to a class. I know I went to a class with you somewhere, and we brought it back and taught it. But when we got the computers in the station, you got to see what was going across the United States in the fire service. And you started clicking on these videos, and you start picking up new techniques, how you pull hose, cutting holes, advancing ladders, just all this, new techniques. And so that was the biggest change. Does being a firefighter make me a better man? I'm not going to say it is. And I'm going to tell you, I think how you represent yourself and people learn you and understand you, you're the person you are. Does firemen along the way help you? Yes. I remember one incident at 7, Danny Nelson. I'm 25 years old, and he comes in, and this is that talk you have at the kitchen table in the morning, and he was talking about things his son just got in trouble. It wasn't nothing major. And I sit there, and I'm thinking to myself, I didn't have no kids. How would you handle this? I'm thinking, I probably want to wear him out. But that's what I learned was, how's he handling it? And then you hear another guy talk. How does he handle the situation? And you learn from it. You learn that. So it doesn't really, I guess you could say that made me a better father figure because I learned from some of the older generation. If I was asked to come back to speak to a rookie class, what would I say to them? Well, first of all, I would want to let them know the friendship you build. Whew. I got to stop a second. Tell them, you're going to build friendships in this department that's unbelievable. I have 3 unbelievable friends. I had plenty during my whole career, but there's 3. Chief Henley, Captain David Birch, and Captain Tommy Brown. We grew a relationship with the department. 2 of us came through training, but we, not just with the department, as our kids growed up, all 3 of us has been at every daughter's weddings. We've been at every baby shower, and fortunate 3 of us are grandparents, Captain Birch, Chief Henley, and me, so we all have grandkids. And we actually go to their birthday parties. We do their birthday parties together. So that's one thing that you can't take away as a friendship. You can only count them on one hand, and I enjoyed having them. The second thing I would like to tell the firefighters, and I might step on a little toes here, but there's a difference in a fireman and a firefighter. And the reason I'm going to say this, I taught classes at the training center here. I taught them out in the county. I taught at G-Tech and the academy out there some. And I took this job with a passion. The fireman, I always said the fireman is that guy that comes in, he puts his gear on the truck, and pretty much that's it. He walks, talks to his friends, or he goes to the kitchen, and he's not prepared. You're jeopardizing your company, their family members, and yourself, and it doesn't do it justice. What is a firefighter? A firefighter is that person that comes in every day. He checks his air pack. He checks his low alarm system. He checks his Nomex hood, his gloves. He's prepared to go save somebody. And when he gets to that call, he is dressed and their company is ready to do their job. It was never more frustrating to watch a company show up, unless they was out, but if they left that station and show up and they're not in gear, it drove me insane. And I would tell the recruit, never get relaxed at this job. Never. Questions about, a firefighter's wife and, basically.
And it could be husband now as well.
Yeah, and husband now, vice versa. It seems like the wife, every time something went wrong, kid got in trouble, it seemed like we was at the fire station and they'd call us. That was and it wasn't much, but it always seemed that way. But there's a lot that goes on. You coach sports, you know what it's like, and people, you gotta run them this practice. You gotta do their homework, and we're at the fire station, and that's a tough role. And then you don't even sit down and get to talk to them till late at night, and they're wore out by the end because they went to their job, worked 8 to 5, and then they got to run here, run there. And the other thing that helped out, you met friends along the way that could help get your kid home, and you trusted. But a fireman's wife is unique. I know mine, she's still going through it. She's learned how we have to schedule around things. And now we got grandkids and all, we have to schedule around our kids and their family. So getting together on a birthday, my wife's birthday is this Sunday, we done it this past Sunday, just because that was the only time you get together. So for every family, it's going to be unique and different. But the wife, she's the heartbeat of them kids. What would I leave a special message for? I was fortunate to have 2 kids, me and my wife. They followed in my footsteps. They done good. But there was always a running joke when they got married, and the fathers got to do the speech. And when you're there and there's 100 people there, both sons is there. And, you want to make it a little entertaining when you're doing this speech. And I basically my wife had to help me and I had to write everything down. But I talked about, the bride, and then I talked about my sons following in their daddy's footsteps. And, I was very proud of it. But when they was sitting there and everybody's listening, I said, but the only thing I want y'all to know, it took 2 of you to replace me. And the place erupts. But no, that's really a joke. Both my boys, they have done exactly what me and their mother raised them. Their mother had to do a lot because we're gone every 3rd day. No, I wish the best for both of them. They have done an excellent job since they've been here, what I hear. Only thing I would ask them is always be the firefighter, not the fireman. They knew I had a passion for that end. And one thing I told them, I said, after y'all on 5 years, y'all will know more than me. The new techniques and new things like that is great. I said, probably the only thing I will, have advantage on you is big commercial fires, how to attack them. I said, but I want you to learn that too. But no, me and my wife were very proud of them. But also, I would like to, I know I mentioned this earlier about officers showing these videos. Sometimes a training tool, I think it's very important. And I appreciate all what y'all done. It's a lot behind the scenes. I didn't know it till I started researching all this. And we appreciate what y'all do. And thank you for this interview.
In closing, the Greensboro Firefighters History Book Committee hopes you have gained a greater insight into the dangers, the challenges, and emotional events that have influenced and shaped the American firefighter.